All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the MSNS podcast. My name is Ryan Lim. I am going to be a junior one.
And I'm Toby Lin, and I just graduated.
All right. So, yes, for this podcast, I felt like I just want to do, a shifting gear, change of pace of what we normally talk about. Because I feel like even though, as good and amazing as it is to talk about our development within the nursing program in MSNS and external issues, I feel like we kind of have to sometimes take a look back at our own development beyond nursing school and see how that has actually contributed to our time here at USF. And it kind of originated when I was, in high school. No, like I was talking to my high school friends currently, and then we talk about these inside jokes, how good it was back in the day, and then you kind of just have that moment where it's like, man, have things really changed between us? Like we're all like kind of the same. But then I kind of thought back, I was like, I feel like things have definitely changed. From that period between adolescence to adulthood, we have definitely changed, whether it's, physically, mentally, emotionally. And, I wanted to first start off by talking with Toby about, our freshman year of college. Because I feel like that's where it really starts, when you kind of open up the gates and you have yourself open up to this world of like beyond high school, your close friends, and it's a transition to adulthood. So,
Mhm.
I wanted to compare our differences because, I know you commuted and I dormed, and I wanted to just, learn, like, talk
Yeah.
about your experience first about how it was going from high school and then commuting every day to college.
Well, well, so I didn't commute right out the gate. I actually dormed my first 2 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I didn't start commuting until my junior year. But I think as far as why the fre that freshman year is such a drastic change for most people, I think it really comes with people are in my eyes at least, people are a summation of all of their experiences.
Mhm.
So all of the experiences that you have in your life are what make you who you are because you learn from these experiences how to handle them or what to expect, um, or how things can turn out given a particular situation, right? And so the next time that you see something somewhat similar, not the exact situation, but if you see something that's similar, then you'll recognize that, and
Mhm.
then you'll have a kind of some preset ideas and notions on how you want to handle that situation, how you feel like you can approach it.
Mhm.
And so the biggest difference with college is that up until that point, right, for the first 16, 17, 18 years of your life, or however long, that the first time that you really detaching yourself from the home, from your parents, from your closest friends, your your family, right? And so now all of a sudden, all of these experiences you're having, they're no longer within the scope of that home environment. And so one thing I definitely noticed was coming home from college for the first time during that freshman year. It's like it seems like you're totally different. Like my parents were like, "Oh my gosh, he's like a totally different person. What happened to him?" But it's simply that because for the first time you have a period where you're not around them, so they don't get to see all of the minute changes. So when by the time that because there's a period, by the time that they see you again, even if it's just been 1 month, that's 1 month worth of experience that they don't get to be a part of, that they don't get to see.
Mhm.
And at the same time, this is also 1 month's worth of experience that you're figuring out on your own with your friends, or just without that influence. And so now, for the first time, you have to kind of make these decisions on your own.
Wait, did you find it hard though, that change of like staying at home all the time for 17, 18 years and then going straight into the dorms with like
Yeah, yeah.
is it like did you like know who you were rooming with beforehand or no?
No, I didn't know who I was rooming with beforehand. So that was another thing, figuring out like how to navigate these relationships. And I think I definitely, in a lot of ways, could have done better at navigating those relationships. There were definitely a lot of points where I was like, maybe I didn't handle that the best way. But I really liked the people that I roomed with my first year. It was really cool. group environment. We all got along pretty well. I do wish I spent more time hanging out with them. That's something that I was like, oh man, kind of missed out on that. But I think, oh, just needing to really stay on top of myself for like my meals and stuff, making sure that I'm eating, um, because I was living up on Lone Mountain and
Mhm.
all the food was on main campus. I was like, I really want to walk all the way down, get food, and then come back up. And then by the time I come up, it's kind of like lukewarm anyways because it's so cold outside.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like if I eat, I should do it at like 4 or 5 or 6. Once it gets past 6, I do not want to go down. So it was, yeah, that was definitely something I was like, man, I don't want to be lazy, but at the same time, it's kind of far. So that's something, and then other things, just making sure to take care of yourself mentally, physically, all those things, right? Because you don't have someone chasing. And I think it's like you don't realize that that's gone until you're out. At least in my household, I was like, with parents that are pretty involved with my life, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, they're not there. And it's funny because I try to make it a point to call them um pretty frequently, like at least once a week or so, and they were kind of just like, why are you calling us? Like, go do your thing. But they also appreciated it, I could tell. So it was kind of funny.
Totally felt that. Like, because my parents, have been very involved in my life, like,
Yeah,
high school, middle school, everything. And then it's just this complete 180. Because, and also, I don't know if I told you, but like, I'm an only, and, you
yeah.
know, I've had the privilege and luxury of like always having my own room. I've always been used to being by myself and just having my own space. And I guess it's kind of selfish, but like, yeah, I haven't really needed to share.
Well, I mean, hey, that's your experience, right? You haven't.
But then you kind of have that 180 flip in norms where you go into this environment, you don't really know these two other people, and you're going to be sharing this very confined space with them for a couple of months, sleeping together, everything. And it was pretty good. Oh god, dude. Like my first night was like horrible. 'Cause,
Uh,
just like backtrack a little, like my two roommates, one of them I kind of knew beforehand. Like you guys know Jordan Lowe, MSN.
yeah.
He contacted me in the summer and we got to know each other a little bit. So he was cool. He was honestly the best roommate ever. But then my second roommate, I'm not gonna say his name or anything, but like
Didn't work out.
he was an international student. He didn't really speak English too much. We didn't speak at all really at all like throughout the semester. And it was just that first night, dude. Oh my god. Like I'm not a knock to anybody, but he was snoring, and I couldn't sleep until like 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. in the morning. That first night,
Ooh.
going from like just being by myself the whole all 18 years, and then going to that, I was like, dude, I cannot do this. I don't know. I regret doing it. But then you slowly get used to it. But then that roommate, it's so funny because I don't know. I feel like he definitely has a different cultural background than we do, like than Jordan
Mm,
and I think when it came to relative to space, he didn't understand too well about like what's mine, what's yours, what's ours. And then so he took it as like the whole room was his in a sense.
mm.
So his laundry or his trash was everywhere. And even when it came to changing, he just let loose. Because Jordan and I can like we all really didn't know each other. We were like, like put a towel on, like if you're gonna change like underwear or whatever.
Yeah.
But he just
It's just difference in like in your approach to like culture, right? Like boundaries and all of that, which is one of the bigger learning curves because you have three people who are likely coming from different backgrounds. Like all of the people in my room, we came from different places, and so it's like learning like, okay, what are people cool with, what are people not cool with, but at least having that conversation, which is something we did quite a lot. Was like if something bothered us, like we had different levels of we had one guy who was pretty neat, and then the other two of us were kind of varying levels of messy. um Certain areas, so like for me it's like my desk would tend to get kind of messy. whereas for him it would be like more like the floor or whatever. But I think we had a good system where it was like, hey, if something's a bother, like let's talk about it rather than try to kind of dance around it, and so that worked really well for us. Um, well, overall, there's really cool dudes, but it was also I think something that was I didn't realize at the time was for me. I didn't realize like I kind of use my space to like get be in my head and like I don't mind just kind of doing my own thing, which I think not realizing at that point would come off as I'm not interested in like spending time with other people, which I don't know why. I was just like, I don't, yeah, I get kind of burned out. I was like, over time now I realize like, oh yeah, I kind of just sometimes just need my time to be on my own and do my thing.
But I feel like that communication part is something that I've never really had to do until college. Because
Mm-hmm.
in high school, I never really had to have too many I never really had too many conflicts with my friends. We never really had to have that kind of discussion about
Yeah, yeah,
because we see each other during the day, a couple at lunch or whatever. You don't really see them after that unless But then when you go to college, when you see each other 24/7, especially when you're roommates, and then they start doing things that are different from how your lifestyle's been, and you're not really able to adjust. They're not really able to adjust. That
yeah.
was a new experience for me to kind of sit down and have that. It's like a confrontation in a sense, because it kind of felt like two of us had a problem with one person, but we kind of had to make sure that we weren't just telling him what to do, that we kind of had to compromise, and that
Yeah.
and that really opened my world up to the idea of give a little and receive a little back, because
Mm-hmm.
because I'm gonna be honest, when I'm an only child, like if I want something, or it's like, because it's only me and not with my siblings, it's always kind of been my way versus no one else's, because there's no one else to compromise with. And then
Yeah.
transition into college, and I guess in a way into adulthood, that's kind of how I started to mature. I kind of realized that it's not just about me. It's not only me. It's
Mm-hmm.
you consider everybody else's point of view when you're in this very small and confined living space.
Yeah. And although I think there's another thing going off of that is we tend to put a lot of emphasis on growth and on maturity and on adulthood. And it's not to say that college isn't that, but there's more to it than that. Because what I've seen is, college is its own beast, right? It's 4 years, lots of experiences, lots of different things happening, lots of stuff going on in general, right? Like you thought high school was crazy, here's college, which is just as crazy, just in different ways. And then you graduate, and then there's all these other things too. And so it's like it's just one formative period after another because these are really those important years, right? Where you're kind of figuring out yourself, figuring out how you fit in the world, what you're trying to do and achieve. Um, but there's a lot of these kind of people who've written books and motivational speakers and all of that, people who kind of really looked into the theory and process of growth and figuring out your life, and it's no one really has their life figured out, right? You could be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 at the end of your life, and you might still not have your life figured out, right? We have a very finite amount of time that varies from person to person. Some people have more, some people have less time, and I think that oftentimes we spend so much time focusing on, oh, I want to grow, I want to be better, and it's like it's not bad to do that, but the fixation with trying to kind of change and improve now rather than seeing that, oh, maybe it's a continuous process. You'll have your good days, you'll have your bad days, and and when you really look at it, it's funny because after college, things seem so different. It's like, oh, you seem like such a different person, but if you really think about it, you're not that much different than the person that you were maybe 4 years ago. And that person's not that much different from the person you were 4 years prior to that, right? Because you're still the same person, you just have some differences. Like there's a lot of you that's still the same, I think, overall, because you don't really get to choose the experiences per se that I think that happen to you. You know, life kind of just happens.
Yeah.
You can do certain things that might shift you onto a slightly different path, but I feel like in general, life kind of goes in a one general direction. You know, like if we were to say that life is kind of like a slope where you're kind of just going down that way, there's a slope that's the general direction of where you're heading, and there's all of these different paths that you kind of take. They'll curve off, and I feel like we have so much agency and decision making and impact in our decisions, but one path might be curved and the other path might be windy, but they might generally take you along the same path, right? So it's like I think we like to think that, and it's kind of like an ego thing, where like my actions have so much impact on how my life is going to play out, and so every decision, every choice we make feels so much bigger than it might actually be. And if you think about it, things that seem so important when you were in, the second grade, then the fourth grade, then the eighth grade, and then you get to high school, and then you get to college, and then it's like every time you come out of that situation, you look back at it, a month later, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, etc. It becomes less and less impactful, right? It's just in that moment, it seems so impactful because that's what you can see. Then when you look more long term, it's like, okay, is it that big of a deal for you to do this one thing over another, or generally is it mostly going to be the same? So just enjoy. Like I don't think we spend enough time really enjoying the moment of
Oh,
what we're in, and so we miss a lot of things, right? It's like we're so fixated on we have to do it right. We have to make the right decision, do the right thing, say the right thing, think the right thing that will take us to this point, right? And so it becomes a lot more about the destination rather than the journey itself. And when we when we when we think that way, then everything becomes results oriented, and your life kind of turns into like a transactional relationship where you have to do something to get something you want, and that's all there is to it, rather than kind of taking a step back and realizing, okay, maybe it's not that big of a deal. Let's try this thing. It doesn't work, then try the other thing or try something else, and just kind of keep navigating life, right? Because there's no map, there's no GPS. You just kind of have to feel your way around it. And oftentimes I think we're kind of feeling blind. Like we don't really have that, future foresight to look into the future of how this is going to play out. But we do when we've had some experience, but we still never know exactly how it's going to turn out. Right?
mhm.
So that's how experience kind of, in some ways, is beneficial. In some ways, it also blinds us because we feel like we know what's going to happen. Like, oh, this is going to happen. It's going to play out like this because I've seen this before. And then each time kind of might end up being slightly different.
You know,
But at the same time, we're also afraid of, repeating our past mistakes. But are they really mistakes, or was it simply an undesirable outcome? And you learn from that. And so, rather than being afraid of repeating it, just try to learn from that and see how you can do things differently. And we put so much emphasis on, oh, people who don't pay attention. Like, if you don't pay attention to history, it's doomed to repeat itself, and all these fears, right, of going backwards, of um, regressing. Well, oh, I'm going back on my growth as a person. Well, is it really going back on your growth as a person if you're aware of that fact? If you're aware that this is something that you've done in the past and you don't want to do that anymore. So if you're aware of that, and then you're actively making a decision to recognize that and try to move on from that and do things a little differently. Right?
I feel like that fixation on the future and not having enough time to enjoy the present. I feel like you would know that I've definitely had that problem because I've discussed that to you many, many times
Yeah.
about how like even though it's kind of this weird thing where like you were saying, trying to be aware of yourself. But for me, it's like I'm aware of that happening, but somehow I can't stop myself from feeling that way. Where it's like I'm so focused on the future that I already feel like the present is already in the distant past.
Yeah,
Always
yeah,
just so fixated on like, oh my god, what volunteering should I do? What internship should I try to do? Or what's my future? Like, oh, like you said, like I feel like I've put so much weight on every decision I am making or I'm going to make, and I feel like it's gonna change everything about my future.
yeah.
Slowly, as
Mhm.
as I've kind of done a little bit more, self-reflection, I've I began to kind of enjoy the present a little bit because right now, rather than having that, results-based mindset of like and like through like of seeing in the future, I've kind of go on that opposite side of using intuition, using feeling. What do I want to do right now? Not based on what I'm trying to do in the future, but how do I feel today in this present moment? How am I going to enjoy this present moment and move forward from there? That's what I've been trying to do this summer, and I feel like slowly but surely it's definitely helping.
Yeah. And I think that, it's a very natural reaction to feel pressure, to feel like you have to do something now for the future, right? You have to set the foundation. You have to do the right things that will allow you to progress and build upon, and everything's like a stepping stone. You do the volunteering so that you can, get your network, and then your network's built, and then you get your license or whatever, and CNA, your EMT, whatever it is, and so you can do it that as another step because you want to build your network so that by the time you graduate, then you can have hopefully some job lined up, and you want to have that job lined up because you want to work as a nurse, you want to start your career, and then you want to use that to do this or that, and then just it's so much more. There's always something more, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with death anxiety, where we're so afraid of the end of our lives that we fail to really enjoy the life that we actually have. And it's not until you read or listen to people who are in the process of dying that you start to realize that the closer you get to death, it's almost like the closer you get to life.
Oh yeah.
Where the clarity that people have at the end of their lives, especially people who are dying who have you know a terminal illness that they know they're going to die, and so at that point death really it becomes real. It's no longer this irrational fear, and so because death is almost physically present, they're like, well, death is going to happen, so what do I want to do with the rest of the time that I have, rather than, oh my gosh, I only have 80 years to live,
Yeah.
let me cram as much crap as I can because I want to milk it. I want to ensure that I have an amazing 80 years. But if you think about it, like if we're so focused on ourselves in that 80-year time span, that 90-year, 100 or less, some people are like, I only want to live 60 years. Okay, so in those 60 years, what is with the fixation on only improving yourself? Why the emphasis on I have to do all of these things in order to live a good life? If you look at it and think about it, at the end of that 60 years, what have you achieved? Right? Like let's just take a hypothetical nursing student, right? You know, you go from K to 8, and from 8 you go to high school. You graduate high school, you're in the USF's nursing program, and you go through your 4 years, and through those 4 years, you're a volunteer, not because you want to, because you need to volunteer, and you need to join all of these clubs and organizations, um, because you need to build your resume, and your resume needs to be built so that by the time you apply to a job, then you have all of these things behind you. So then you apply to the job, and you get the job because you did all your work, and you're an outstanding, stellar applicant, right? And so you get your job. But oh, you need to do your however many years at your job because you want to become a CRNA, an NP, nurse manager, what was it, nurse administrator, right? Director of nursing, or you want to go back to teach. And so you do all that, and then by the time you get to that next step, then you're like, well, now I have all these other things that I want to achieve. Or maybe you start a family, or instead of starting a family, you just living, you're like, okay, now I can live life. Oh, but I can't live life because I have all these other things I need to do. And then so by the time you're done with all that, now you look at your life, you're 60, you're 70, you're 80. What have you achieved? Right? So there's all of this emphasis on advancing your career. You have to do things now. And yet, if we take a look at all of the people that have been a part of our nursing journey, especially a lot of our faculty, there's people in the nursing program, faculty, who didn't get their PhD until late in their careers. They've been a nurse for 20 years, 30 years, some even 40 years, and then now they're going back to school and getting their doctorate, their master's, whatever it is, right? So for them, it's not about getting it now. They don't have to be maybe some of these programs didn't exist in the capacity that they are now, but at the same time, like, what's the difference between the 28-year-old master's PhD nurse compared to the 60, 70-year-old master's PhD nurse? And what's the difference between those two? And my point isn't to say that we shouldn't be pursuing these things, or that you shouldn't volunteer, but it's more of what is the reason behind you choosing to do that. Are you doing it because you want to, or are you sucking it up, as we like to say, because it's something you have to do, you need to do? Do you really have to do that? Do you really need to do that? Or do you only feel like you have to because you want to cram all of these things? And so one thing for me that I've kind of gathered from all of the people that I've watched and listened to, and trying to see what their perspective is, if every and it's an idealistic ideology, right? Where if every person lived for someone else, the world might be a better place, in the sense that if each person tried to create a significant and positive impact in someone else's life, how many people do we have in the world that, if that were the case, then there might be a lot of things that we may not see in life, right? Because a lot of the conflicts and issues that we tend to have are because we don't see other people. When you have a me mentality, when you're only looking at yourself, other people's problems become insignificant. Why should I care about someone else's suffering if it's not my own? And so we don't take time to understand and educate ourselves and become aware about the things that other people are facing. And if we don't do that, we don't recognize that, then those problems don't exist, because what we don't see can't possibly exist, right? And so the first step comes with becoming aware about what's going on with other people, and that comes with empathy and compassion and taking the time to be understanding. And that's something that we spend 4 years learning, but it's one thing to learn about it, it's another entirely to really put that into action. And it's not an easy thing, right? It's hard to put yourself in a vulnerable situation, to say that you don't know, because we don't like to admit that we don't know something. And so it's difficult to say, I don't know what you're going through, but I want to find out. I want to learn. I want to educate myself to see what are you dealing with and how can I help. Right? And so if obviously that's not a realistic thing. There's no way that we can get every single person to live somewhere, because that's where the flaws in the human condition come in. Right? We're not necessarily, like, selfishness and greed. That's something that's taught through experience, through um, people, because no one's born selfish. And over time, as you live, these things happen. So really, you know, at the kind of core of it being like we're not selfish people, we're taught to be selfish. However, it's not to say that we should all just be like, oh well, if that's never going to happen, we should just never, let's just not even bother with that because I don't want to feel like I'm compromising myself, sacrificing my well-being if I'm the only one doing it. Well, if everyone thinks that, then no one's going to do it, right? And so even if it's just one person, that positive impact goes on. If that one person hopefully takes that positive experience and goes, I want to help someone else to feel what I felt.
Mhm.
And it's a selfless act, and you don't gain anything from it monetarily, or just physically. The gains that you get from it are all um, kind of non-tangible things, and you're not doing it because you want that feel good feeling. You're doing it because it's right, because you want to, and that's what true sacrifice is, right? Is giving without asking for it in return. Because if you're asking for something, and that becomes transactional, that becomes something that you're only maintaining that relationship because you see something to gain from it, and so you're giving something to be able to take something. But to really make that positive impact on someone, you give without expecting them to give anything in return. If they do, great, but oftentimes you're not looking for that.
But I feel like the internal conflict arises when someone's not able to balance between like the amount they put into themselves and the amount they give out to everyone else. I feel like it's so important that yes, we have to do things very selflessly, give to everyone else, not ask for anything in return. But I think there is always going to be a certain point where you give, and you don't give enough to yourself, and that
Mm-hmm.
burnout happens.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that because that happens, there's also that internal conflict where some people cannot differentiate between self-care and selfishness. Like maybe
Mm-hmm.
I think I've definitely had that conflict myself where, when I'm very busy and there's like maybe I'm home, from school, it's a summer or like a winter break, and then I'm super burnt out from all the classes I've done, all the finals, all the midterms. I just want a little time to myself, but I feel like, but then your friends are asking for your help to like move back, or your parents are asking for something, and then you're like, you say no, you refuse because you are so burnt out that you physically and mentally cannot invest yourself into something else right now.
Yeah.
I think I've had that challenge where I had thought to myself, am I trying to promote, like, I feel like I'm trying to promote my self care. Like, I need to take a step back and, like, be on my own. But I'm like, am I being selfish that I want to just be alone right now versus helping my family and friends?
Yeah, it's difficult, right? Especially when you see someone who needs you, and that's definitely something I struggle with too, because it feels selfish, right? When you recognize that there's a need and you're choosing to do something for yourself because you recognize that you also need that. And so I think it comes with balance, and it's not a 50-50 balance. It's simply recognizing how much do you need to allocate to yourself in order to be able to keep on going, right? Because and something this is something that someone else has told me before too, is you can only you can't take care of other people until you take care of yourself. And so you have to take the time to kind of sit with it and realize, okay, how much time do you need to yourself to be able to continue being there in the same or similar capacity for other people? Because if you're constantly burning yourself out, that time that you're burnt out, that time that you need to recover is also time that, not that it's a bad thing, but that's also time that gets taken away from other people too, even though we don't realize it. And so taking the time to give to yourself, you're also a person who has a need,
Mhm.
right? It's just as important to give to yourself as it is to give to other people. But I think the important point isn't so much that we have to spend all our time giving to other people. It's more so give to other people in the capacity that you can, and that varies from person to person. Some people can give more, some people give less, and that's simply where you are at that point in time. There's people who give way less than their means, and there's people who give way more than their means, and then there's everyone else in the middle.
Mm.
Right? And so the ideal is trying to find that space in the middle where you're giving about as much as you can without really hitting your limits, because the moment you hit your limits, then you burn out.
Yes.
And so taking that time to work on yourself is also, in a sense, taking the time to help other people, because you're ensuring that you will be able to continue giving to other people long term rather than simply in the short term when you have a burst of, oh my God, I'm maybe altruistic, I'm going to help people without asking for anything in return. I want to do all of it for the benefit of others. And then you burn yourself out and you check out for like a month or two or three or four or years before you go back to help. And it's like, had you been able to take the time to give to yourself, you may have been able to continue creating that impact. And some impact is still better than no impact, right? If there's nobody out there who's caring about others, how about for the people who can't fend for themselves? What are they supposed to do? So even if it's just one person helping another out, it goes a long way, because that person now is not in a position where they can only fend for themselves. They might be able to help someone else too, even if it's small.
And
And
it's
so the ripple effect, you know.
yeah. And like you were saying earlier, like many things in life, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Because
Mm-hmm.
reiterate what you were saying, how I feel like it gets to a point where you're just like give, and then the second you hit kind of that threshold, it's like burnout, and then recover, give, and then rather than doing that, I think a lot of people need to learn that it's a marathon where you kind of have to have this steady pace right in the middle, where maybe it's day to day or week to week, month to month, whatever it is. It's like you give a little, you have to kind of after you give a little, you kind of have that take a step back and kind of have that self care. Whether it's taking time to exercise, meditate, whatever. Just have a little bit of time. I feel like I guess it's called like me time or whatever.
Yeah.
Everybody needs that. And I think the only reason why I know that I've learned this now is because I've been on the opposite end. I think I'm still on the opposite end.
Yeah.
Right? I rather than being on this marathon pace, I was on the huge like just only 100-meter sprint where it's just like me. No. I mean like give, like giving of myself just to everyone else, or just give not even to like other people, just giving myself to just nursing school in general, just giving myself to everything other than performing self-care. That I feel like this summer is where I'm like still trying to recover from everything I've been doing for everything else other than myself.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. And it's, I think more so than a steady pace, because we try to, we don't like change,
Right.
right? Change is bad. Change is all terrible, right? So it's not so much that we need to maintain a steady pace, but I think it's recognizing that it's all generally heading in the same trajectory, and we'll have ups, we'll have downs, but recognizing that overall it's still in a positive direction versus in the negative, right? Because there's, I think how we view setbacks has a huge impact on our long-term mental health and our long-term ability to continue doing what we do. Because if every setback is so impactful, then it turns us off from even trying, and that's the danger. Is the moment we stop trying, it's like a part of us dies, because we life is unpredictable, and if you're not willing to take that step or that plunge to go over the hump, then there's a lot of things that you won't see or find out,
Yeah.
because life is all about risk, right? And everything we do, putting ourselves in a vulnerable situation, is a risk, even if it doesn't seem like going to college away from your family is a risk. Rooming with people is a risk. All of these risks happen. And so it's about how we manage that. Because if every setback is so major, then the first time you fail a test in college, what are you going to do then? Right? Do you implode, or do you take that as an opportunity of recognizing that maybe you didn't study as hard, or maybe you're studying harder for what the best, and you need to change that. And I'm definitely not the best person to be spewing that. Um, but it's true, right? You have to take all of your setbacks and try in some way to learn from them and see what went wrong.
And I think it's that moment when you welcome change, that you suddenly find out that there's so many more opportunities out there. Because if you keep staying the same, you stay in this like little bubble. I feel like not only are you not welcoming opportunities, you're just completely pushing everything else out to make sure you stay in your little bubble. And backtracking to like that dorm experience, like it was when because I dormed freshman year, and then sophomore year I went back home like now, and I was commuting, and that's when I really felt that resistance to changing a bit. Because freshman year I have I found my, I guess, clique in a sense, my group of friends that we
Yeah,
hang every day, talking. It was just us, and then we transition into sophomore year where I'm, away from everybody else. Everybody else is still dorming. I'm commuting, so I can't really stay the late nights that we used to. We're not as close anymore. And I think when they started, hanging out with other people, I started hanging out with other people. That was when I had that conflict of like resistant change because I was so stressed and anxious about losing everybody because they were hanging out with other people. But I think once I kind of slap myself out of it. I start talking, like rather than just being stressed about the whole situation and like being in that bubble, I kind of talk with my friends. I talk to my best friends about like the situation, how I felt, the anxiety I felt, and I think once I was really able to welcome that change, like understand that like we can't keep living the same life we always do every single
yeah,
moment of every day. Everything is changing. This life, what is very dynamic, and once I kind of understood that, welcome that change, it felt so much better. And once I did, I was like, once I, allowed myself to realize, what, I can't live in this bubble of just these few friends. I kind of have to push myself, like my other friends did, push myself to meet new people, and, seek out or more opportunities. That's when I really did push myself to join organizations that I love, like RockMed, find new jobs, pursue EMT. That's when I really pushed myself because I welcomed I did the dynamic nature of life.
yeah, yeah. I think that it's always difficult when you feel like you're growing apart as friends, or when life kind of forces you apart. And I think that as difficult as that is, you also gotta recognize that people are brought together by experience, and especially traumatic experiences. Like people that you've been through something with, near death situation, or just any form of trauma. Yeah, people are bonded through that, and it's something that we can't really explain because that's something that hits us on a very primitive level. When you hit your fight or flight and you're doing it collectively, that experience really bonds you together. And so, we're always afraid of that, but we also get rid of it. Things happen, people change, they go apart, they come back together, and as long as it's something that you want to continue pursuing, then you put in the work and effort, and hopefully the other person wants to as well to maintain that relationship, right? Because I think we have a tendency to get very narrow-minded, right? Like, oh, you're either with us or against us, or um, we tend to let our egos get in the way of maybe a potentially good relationship. And sometimes the relationships aren't good, and you do go apart, and you do recognize that, hey, maybe this isn't something that I necessarily want to continue pursuing because it's not the best for me or for them. And that's okay. Those things happen, but generally, I think with a lot of relationships, we tend to let our egos get in the way, especially when it comes to that high school to college transition, where you kind of fall out with some friends over time because you're no longer spending time together. And that's the thing is, when you're not spending time with some people, it's a lot easier for you to fall out of that relationship because people are bonding together through experience. And so if you're not having experiences together, it's very easy to fall out of that. And of course, you do come back and come back and you see people, and maybe you're still good friends. Some people are, and some people realize they come back and they're like, it's kind of different because people do change, even if it's not significant or as significant. It does happen, and sometimes people change in ways that others aren't really too keen on, and so they go, well, this is what I signed up for, so I'm out. I'm good. This is no longer something I want to be a part of, and we just have to accept that. Okay, that happens. At the same time, maybe there's also a relationship where you're like, well, this isn't working right now, but I can see it still working. Let's figure some stuff out. Let's work on what is preventing us from continuing to maintain this. And it really all goes back to us feeling like we always have to do something now, always having to achieve something now. And it's not so much that we have to do that now, but we feel like we have to because we feel like we're limited. We feel that pressure of time, right? It all comes back to that ultimately.
I don't know. I'm just wondering, how did you feel from that transition from like sophomore to junior, where you had to like go from dorming, seeing most of your friends all the time, and then going to commuting? And you live in San Jose, correct?
Yeah.
Where my drive, I live in David City, so my drive isn't that bad, but you have to kind of reschedule. Maybe you have to kind of change your schedule or adjust your schedule to fit times where you can drive home or you can drive there. How was that and the dynamic between your friends?
I mean, you definitely see less people. I don't think that I have the worst commute. There's people who commute from like Sacramento
Mhm.
or further, where the commute's like 3+ hours one way, just to go to school. And so, the lengths that people go to be able to attend school is amazing. And so, my hour, while it did feel like a lot at the time, and in some ways it still is a lot, but it's also not the worst that any anyone I know has experienced. And so it's all about perspective. So it's not that it wasn't a bad job, but like it was, but that's for me. And being able to recognize that other people also are going through it or worse definitely helped with like, okay, I'm not alone in this. Um, it was difficult as far as at the time when I first um, moved back. Um, I was also working at the time, and so without realizing it, I wound up pulling like 12, 13-hour days, 6 days a week, um, because of work and school. And so I was like, shoot, like I'd leave at, what was it, like 6:30, and then I'd get home at like 7:30 sometimes. And so it definitely became a lot. Luckily, it was my junior one semester, so at least workload intensity wasn't too bad. So if there was a semester to manage this and deal with this, it was this semester. Ultimately, you want to quit my job because I was like, I can't do this. This is too much. Um, and in some ways, I'm like, dang, I kind of miss it. But at the same time, I was like, no, I had to do that. That was the right decision. But yeah, it's a transition for sure because no longer do you get to spontaneously, like, someone's like, hey, let's hang out, let's talk, do whatever, and it's like, well, I gotta go home. And you go home and it's like 7, and it's like, well, I gotta do my work or whatever it is, and then you're back to bed, rinse repeat over and over and over. And I wouldn't do that again, but I also don't know how I got to do that.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking back, I'm like, how did I get anything done at that time? But like also, there wasn't a whole lot.
Right? It's that initial phase that just hurts so much. And I feel like finally now, when you said all that, that's when I kind of understand why you burnt out junior one, like you said.
Yeah, yeah. Like junior one was definitely a burnout semester. And then I definitely burnt out junior two as well. And then so that whole summer, like I didn't realize it, but I was pretty burnt out. Like I was, and then like I decided to work two jobs, and then I also was still doing my internship at the same time, and so I was just like, shoot, I didn't allow myself to get a break, and so um, then I wound up there wasn't much to do for the internship, so I was like, okay, well, if there's not much to do, then we'll just kind of chill on that, and so we stopped doing that as much, and then um, my other shift at my other job was up because I was only doing temporary, and so then it went back down to one job. But I think, and then so senior one was a lot better in some ways, where it's like not as burnt out. But there were other things that I was dealing with that semester that was like, well, shoot. And so it's like by the time graduation came around, I was just like, wow. And so it was like, it was a little, cause like, yeah, cause I took the HESI 3 times too. And so it was like, I felt like down to the wire, I was still doing something, there was still something going on. And so it took a while to get to the point where I was like, wow, I'm tired. um, and then like work was picking up again, and then I got a new job, and so it's just like one thing after another. But at the same time, it's also, that's how life is. We just kind of jump from one thing to the next, and it's all about really checking yourself, I think, because we we really do put so much emphasis on needing to have it figured out, and people will be in their 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and still not have their life figured out. But it doesn't mean that you stop living. You just, one thing leads to another, and it's all about how you go about it. Because even with people who we feel like have the ideal lives, you ask them, they go, no, I don't. Like, there's still so many things I'm trying to figure out. It's not that they're downplaying what they have going on, but it's simply that, you know, we have goals, we have aspirations and dreams, and we want to achieve those. But the moment we achieve one, there's another one that's next. And so taking the time to really enjoy that process as much as we can, I think is the way to go. The late Kobe Bryant, I think, really embodied that, and we get to see it in how he lived his life. He was intense on the court, and he was intense off the court. And I think he's just overall just a really good example of how that, because he really showed people, and he's a very visible example of the kind of intensity that he approached life with. But it wasn't this. I don't think it was in the way that people always, we tend to have a tendency to wants to, like, when you do that now. But this guy, he was intense, but in terms of his drive, not so much his fixation on eating stuff to be done for the sake of getting them. He always did things with a purpose. He wouldn't do something unless he had a reason to. And you know he saw life as a system of processes rather than a list of, a grocery or laundry list of things to do. It was more so, I'm doing these things to gear myself for that, rather than I have to do this step one, step two, step three, step four to get to step five. But then by the time you get to step five, there's always six, seven, eight, nine, 10. Right? He was more of, these things are all connected, and so I'm doing these things because this thing leads back to that thing that leads to this other thing, and so on and so forth. And so it was really interesting to see how he had closed his chapter on basketball and transitioned into his, very short 3 years of post basketball life, where he was focused on the impact that he could make on other people and the lasting impact that he could leave. Not because he was full of himself, but he saw a need and something that he could do, that he wanted to do. Um, and we're seeing it even now, the lasting impact of what he did in his short time alive. And so I think it's important to see that here's someone who, and he's not without his flaws, but the positive thing that we can take away from the way he lived his life was, here's someone who, saw life as an opportunity and took that, took what he had. And it's not to say that he didn't work, but he worked for things that he felt were important, things that weren't about necessarily just about himself, but also about other people. And so to see him take the cards he was, having, what's that, 4 daughters,
Yeah.
and he's like, I'm a girl dad, so the things I am doing are for them. And so the way that he impacted, women's sports, but specifically women's basketball, and all the work that he did to try to improve that for his daughters, but also for other generations of young girls and women. It was amazing to see how he could have made it about himself, but he chose to make it about other people. And so I think that's something we can definitely take away from this.
And I feel like
In our way, how can we do that?
I feel like once he did kind of leave that NBA stage of his life, I felt like his priority became something that I felt like maybe he lost during those 17, 18 years in the NBA, which was that time with his family.
Mm-hmm.
Time with his family. And I feel like many people who are close to their death, I feel like when you ask them, about the regrets, what they wish they do, it's all about time. And I feel like a very common theme is time with family and friends. Like the time they lost, back in the day when they were the future, they really miss that time with their family and friends.
Yeah, but I think also, time is a very human construct, right? We always feel, oh, so much loss. It's like we have such a large fixation on lost time that we fail to realize that we're not looking at the time that we could be spending. Why? Okay, if you look back on your life and you go, wow, there's this period where I didn't spend as much time with my family. Well, spend it now. Do it now. What's stopping you? And we may feel, oh, I can't do it because of this. I have a job. Oh, look, make the time, because a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, you're gonna look back and say the exact same thing about this moment. Oh, I wish I could have spent more time. Oh, I definitely could have. Well, if you could see that from 3 years ago, what's stopping you from doing that now? Why are you not able to do that now when in 3 years you can look back and say, oh, I totally could have done that, because hindsight is everything, right? And we don't see that in the moment. In the moment, things are bigger than they seem, more important than they seem. That job or this or that, I can't do it. You can though, because if you're taking the time to watch Netflix or play video games or sit and read and do all these things, you do have the time. It's more so, do you wants to take the time, or are you choosing to take the time? It's much easier said than done, right? We want to believe that we're better than we actually are, but we're flawed, and so it's all about really taking as much time as we can to recognize the things in ourselves that aren't the best, and to over time try to change that. But it's also not linear. It's very sporadic, right? You'll have days where you're better and days where you're worse, and so it's like, how do you ultimately work towards that and be okay with, this is a journey. It's not this one-stop shop where, okay, I'm gonna make a change. I'm gonna do it now. 21 days later, okay, built a habit, great. It's like, no, you gotta take the good and the bad and all of that with it, and recognize what things are you better with, what things are worse, what things make things better, what things make things worse, and just trudge along, so to speak.
I think part of that is just appreciating the whole part of the journey, and rather
Yeah,
than chasing happiness, chasing or just remembering all the good times. I think the only reason why we have happiness, the only reason why we have these good times is because of all the bad times, all the hardships we've shared. That's what is part of the process, and it's not something we can just blatantly ignore to keep trying to pursue this abstract concept of happiness that we don't even know will be there at the end of the tunnel.
yeah, exactly. Like, what is happiness, right? And I think that the word construct, I think, is a really good way to describe things that we try to achieve. We know, for example, we know of the sun, but we don't know the sun, right? We can describe it. We can try to explain it, but all we're explaining are certain aspects, but we don't know the true thing, right? And the same thing with friendship and love and happiness and sadness. We can describe it, but we don't we know things that can make us happy and make us sad, but we don't truly know the thing. We can only continue to strive to achieve to know the thing, because ultimately the thing is just a summation of all of these other things, right? And so we don't we can't know about happiness without knowing its opposite, which is sadness. And so if you don't have your bad times, you don't know the good. And so we try to, the good old days, right? Nostalgia. Oh, high school, what a time, right? But it's like, well, okay, sure, but you're only remembering the good things. You're not remembering the bad because you don't want to remember the bad, and you're only using that as measuring stick. That's the closest thing you can think of that's similar to, say, your college experience. So you think, wow, high school is such a good time. Why is college so tough? Well, do you remember that in high school you said the same thing about middle school, and in middle school you said the same thing about elementary, in elementary you said the same thing about kindergarten and pre-K? It's like there's always something from before that seems so amazing, and then when you really look back at it, maybe it wasn't as amazing as you'd like it to be or remember it to be, but you're just trying to. It's almost like a form of escapism, right? That's why nostalgia is such a huge thing. Like when Avatar gets released on Netflix, and everyone's just, oh my God, Avatar, the good old days, and then you look at it and you're like, well, at the time it was great, but now you're looking at it and you're like, well, the animation's kind of crap. Like it's not as good as I thought it was. And you try to do it on Zoom, and depending on the person's internet, and then it can be like super choppy, and one person's watching it frame by frame, one person has a black screen. Who knows, right? Um, but that's we try to, I think we definitely try to capture goodness and happiness, and we always try to reach out for it. We try to contain it, right? That's why we don't like change, because if things are good, we don't want it to change, and because change is bad. Change is, it's gonna hurt and it's painful, but change is also necessary and it's a part of life. And rather than be afraid of it, because change reminds us of death. Death is the biggest change that's ever gonna happen in our lives, right? Ultimately, what's the biggest change that could happen in life? It's the end of it.
And I feel like when
Death.
you're, oh, sorry.
There you
I think like when you do take that time to enjoy the process, I feel like a lesson we can learn from that is just appreciate, like take time to appreciate the struggle. Because I think once
go.
you start in like looking back and enjoying the nitty gritty, the struggle, all the hard work you had to do, that's when you truly get to appreciate something at the end of the tunnel. And
Yeah.
then the next thing. That's like I feel like that's a huge part of why I'm able to appreciate like for example the Hesse. The Hesse, I think, right, like when I look back at the Hesse, it's not just like, oh my God, that score, thank you so much. Like, it's just, I'm so happy with how I did because of all the hard work and struggle, the late nights. Oh my God, everything before the Hesse. I am able to enjoy that part of my life because of how much I can remember the struggle, how much I can appreciate the process and,
Yeah.
the end product.
And that's what makes it more significant, right? Like for you, it'll be what, 5, 6 years. For me, it'll be 4 years, where you look back at college and you just go, wow, what a good time. Well, it's only a good time because you remember the good that came out of all of the struggle, all of the suffering, all of the pain, all of the stress, late nights, all of that, right? So it's the exact same thing. And so, our happiness is only enhanced by the sorrows that we feel and face that result in that, right? We go through these things, and so I think it's important to recognize that in ourselves and go, okay, so rather than be so fixated on avoiding the pain, simply allow it to happen. And in one of my classes, um, we read a book called Tuesdays with Morrie, and it I really, this book really put a lot of things into perspective for me, because it's like, here's a guy at the end of his life, and you can see how he kind of goes through various stages of grief for accepting that his death is coming, and so what's he going to do about it? And with the disease that he had, ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, like, it's not an easy disease process. It's very debilitating. He loses his autonomy over time, without spoiling too much. But in that loss of his, physical dignity, he gains a lot mentally. What things does he learn about his life, or just about life in general, that you get to see this dichotomy between someone who's in their prime of their lives, their 40s, wow, career driven, right? Achieving great things, and yet who's the one who seems more alive between the two? Who's the one who feels like they're truly living life, and who seems like they're just going through the motions? Who feels like they've actually died? And I think that's an important question to answer when you read the book, because it's like you look and you go, wow, here's a guy who's literally dying, but he's, metaphorically and physically not dying. He's living. He started a new life, even in death. So it's not so much. It's like just like how sadness enhances happiness, death enhances life. And so the closer we get to it, it's almost like the more alive we become. And
Yes.
so the further we try to get away from death is the closer we actually get to dying as a person.
Mhm.
Because we can't avoid that. We don't have life without death because of then we just live forever.
And death death symbolizes this pain, this feelings of regret, mistakes, everything. And I feel like when you're in your life and you try to push away the mistakes, all the pain, I think you're really just pushing away all the lessons and perspectives you can gain from them.
Yeah, and I mean it's all with the culture shift. Right? Like death didn't used to be this big bad scary thing.
Yeah.
Over time, our fixation with life, with the physical, the material, we become much more afraid of the metaphysical, the things that we can't see. We can't necessarily see that. We can see people dying, but we can't see death itself, and so we become afraid of it, right? And so we focus on prolonging our lives and health, improving healthcare, advancements in technologies to make life better, whatever we can to stay away from death. But death is imminent. It can come at any time. Car accidents, a brick falls out of the sky or something, hits you the wrong way. Death can happen at any moment. And so if we're so fixated on all these things we have to achieve, by 40 I want this or that, what happens if your life gets cut short before that? Does that mean you've lived an unfulfilling life? And so one of the coolest things that I enjoyed from having gone to Jesuit institutions is with the examen. Um, and there's various forms of it, of reflection and meditation in different cultures and religion and belief systems. But ultimately, what do we do when we meditate, when we reflect, and we evaluate our lives and see how these impacted us, how we could have impacted others? And so it allows you to become aware, right? And that's the key, is awareness of yourself, of your surroundings, of your impact on people, which allows us to like the more aware we are of something, the more real it becomes. Right?
And I think, like in that fashion, I feel like because we're pushing death to the very edges of our periphery, that's when we are, trying to make ourselves unaware of death.
Yeah.
That's essentially like literally what happened. Because, like I mentioned in the previous podcast, where death used to be, a commonplace in the household. Death took place in the house before all the big hospitals.
Yeah.
And once we started, like when death kind of transitioned into something that only happened in the hospital, away from our eyes, in a sense, that's when the fear stemmed from. We,
Yeah.
instead of seeing death, we kind of allowed it to be pushed away, and because it's pushed away, we don't really want to welcome it back in. And I think that's a huge thing in the book I read, For Death and Dying, The Five Limitations. Welcome
Yeah.
everything. As part of that is kind of welcoming that experience, welcoming that awareness, like you said, of death, so that you don't have to have this anxiety of fear and
Yeah. And the more we're able to be open and talk about death, I think the easier it is to come to terms with death as a part of life. And so what should be your focus when you're living? Because you can't, no matter how hard you try, you can't run away from death. Right? People have tried, the fountain of youth and the immortality and all that. Well, what what we know, and obviously it's a fickle thing, right? What human knowledge is, all what we know, what we think we know. However, from what we do know, death is inevitable. Life is a finite thing, and so how do we how do we turn life infinite? And at least for me, I think it comes from the way we impact other people. And the more you impact other people, I think the more you get impacted by them, right? That's something that I've definitely learned from this program is you go into it wanting to help other people, and in turn, you also get help with things you learn from your patients, from your nurses, the interactions that you have, and you go, wow, okay, there's actually a lot um, that you gain from other people that you don't expect because you need to be open to it. So same thing that we learn from other people when we're open to them. The more open we are to death, the more we can gain as far as our perspective on life. And it's not to say that we should be actively seeking death, but it's more so accepting that death is a part of who we are. And it's easier said than done. The fear of death has been ingrained in us from a very young age. And you can see it in children. There's children who are very afraid of death for very valid reasons. Um, and so, if even children can have this fear of death, then it starts early. And so we've had this for so long. So it's really kind of like finding a way to rewire our brains to not be afraid of death, but accept death so that we can truly live our lives and to turn our life infinite, recognizing that's a part of it. And so if death is inevitable, then isn't it important to impact the people around us,
Yeah.
impact people who might not even be a part of our lives and do things for others in a way that, you're not asking for anything in return. You're simply doing it because that impact goes a long way for well beyond your death. So people in history who've made a lasting positive impact, I should say. You know, those people how long have their actions and their mission and their values, how long has that lived on? For decades, centuries, even for some.
I agree. Like, I feel like knowledge, like you may not, you are, mortal, but I feel like knowledge is infinite. It, crosses everything in time and space. I feel like when we share something, when we are able to give ourselves and help other people, that knowledge is passed down not only to them, but to their children, to everybody. We are
Yeah,
everything we know, and all the advice and things we're saying right now, it's a culmination of everything that happened in the past, not only our past, but to the past of our parents, grandparents, friends, family, everybody. And
yeah,
that knowledge is infinite. And I feel like your responsibility now, I guess, is that when you're helping other people, giving them advice, you're passing on that knowledge to make sure that it continues to be infinite.
yeah. No, definitely. Like it's all about that ripple effect, right? Like you kind of you throw your one stone of kindness, that touches one person, that person hopefully touches another person, and it spreads. So your one impact of one person might impact 10 people, might impact 20, might impact 30, 100, who knows? But if you don't take that first step to be kind, to be selfless, and you're only selfish, then that ripple never starts. That stone never gets cast. And now all of these people that could have been affected now no longer are. Right? So you miss out on that.
Mhm. And I think it only takes one. It doesn't, it could be more, but like you said, it starts with one person. And I feel like you don't have to be something like like the president. You don't have to be someone like a political figure or anything to spread your message. You can just someone just like us, anybody can, as long as you're spreading that love and compassion to at least one other person. I feel like that's where it truly starts. You don't have to wait until you're all the way at the top, or even
Yeah, yeah. No, like even though our in the long run our decisions may not our decision and choice might not be as important, but I think that the things that you look back on yourself and go, well, that wasn't as big of an issue as I thought it would be. I think a lot of those tend to be things in relation to ourselves. But you look at the actions and the impact we made on other people, that you look back on and you go, wow, that was actually just as significant as I thought it would be. That's because it's not about you anymore. It's about other people too.
And I think that's what I feel like all of us were trying to drive to the culture of, especially MSNS. Because,
Yeah.
I feel like any member can create change. You don't have to, just because you're not a part of the e-board, doesn't mean you are not an essential part of the club. Like I was an e-board last semester, like I was an intern still, but I felt like just because I'm a member and not part of the e-board doesn't mean I can't do something special for this club, for the members, for the people beyond the members. And I feel like that's where it starts, having that mindset that you don't need to be way up there at the very top to start creating change. Change just starts with you at any point in your life.
Yeah, and it's cheesy, but USF, be the change from here and
So true though.
all that, right? But it's like it's true. The change starts with you. You can't change other people or what they do. You can only change what you do. And so when you have that choice, what are you going to do? Are you going to act only on yourself, on your own, for yourself? And that's fine. It's not like that's a bad thing, but also how limited does that make your impact? Because now your reach is only one person. If you impact yourself, that impacts just yourself. But you impact another person, that person now can impact another person. And maybe the chain dies, but you just keep going and you keep trying to do that while still taking care of yourself. And then over time, who knows what impact that you can have. And so I think that's important. MSNS really has created a community where anyone, your MSNS experience is your own. Whatever you put in is what you get out. But also, if there's a change, people can make it happen. And you did that. Although you were an intern, so you had a bit of a step up, but still, it still required you to recognize things that you wanted to change and to take the leap to say, speak up and say, hey, I think we could do. And there's other people too who also find a way to step up as a member and then realize, what, I want to do even more. I'm gonna join the e-board, run for e-board and try to continue expanding my impact. So it's really exciting to see so many people who are on the e-board now that a year ago were just starting out and maybe even a little hesitant about joining MSNS. I don't know about this one. It's just it's another organization, another thing to slap on my resume. And people come in and they put so much work in it. They see the potential for where the club can go, even though it's grown a lot in the last 4 years. They still see where MSNS can go, and they want to be a part of it. They want to make that happen. And that's what it's about. Is recognizing things that need change and doing something about it. That's what we're seeing, nationwide with the protests that are, in some places have sparked change, and in others, even in California and in San Jose, we're seeing that there's still a lot more work that needs to be done, because even with protest, even with petitions, even with the things that we want to get done aren't getting done. If anything, they're being ignored. And that means we have to try different ways and to keep attacking that until change happens.
It's all about welcoming change. Although some things in life might be a never-ending pursuit, it's about enjoying the process.
Yeah, it's about the process, but I think also it's about doing what's right. We in the interest of self-preservation, we tend to do things that may not be the best. It's all about you. So when you can look towards other people in what you do and try to improve other people's experiences, that's when your change is positive. Change isn't bad. It's just what kind of change is it?
I think it's a good time to end it.
Yeah.
for watching. Nice.